Hey guys, we made it to season 5 of the Us People podcast. I'm your host, Savia Rocks, and in this season, we aim to empower and embrace creativity through diversity as we dive into the fascinating stories and experiences of a diverse range of individuals, highlighting their unique perspectives and creative endeavors, from artists and entrepreneurs to innovators and activists. We celebrate the power of diversity in driving creativity and fostering positive change. Join us as we engage in thought-provoking conversations like...
I made myself intentionally homeless in pursuit of my purpose.
We're aware that a lot of people want to present and they were in my position, and what's worse, they weren't a white male, which is a joke that's even still a thing.
I think my family never ever say you can't do something, so full of support for whatever dream. If I said tomorrow I want to fly to the moon, they'll probably say I wish you all the best, Mel.
So guys, I just want to say thank you for supporting the Us People podcast for the past 5 years, and we look forward to sharing another new theme song with you. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Katherine Nichols. I write suspenseful women's fiction. My passion is finding ways for women authors to support and connect with one another. And I'm excited to join you today on Us People podcast at Savia Rocks.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Yes People podcast. I am your host, Savia Rocks, and today I am so humbled to have Katherine here with me. Katherine is a published author. Katherine, thank you so much for taking your time to come on the Yes People podcast. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and thank you so much for having me.
No, you're more than welcome. The gratitude is all mine, believe me. It's all mine. So, Katherine, my first question for you is, could you tell me about yourself, but also where you grew up and how that influenced you to be the person who you are today?
Yes, I am from the United States, and I grew up in the South in a city called Chattanooga. It's in Tennessee. You may have heard the old song Chattanooga Choo Choo. That's one of our little anthems. I consider growing up in the South a very formative part of who I am. I learned a lot about what I want to be like and what I don't want to be like, and that is very important. My stories come from places and people that I grew up with. My grandmother plays a tremendous role in my writing. Even when she's not necessarily in the book, she's there. And I think that those relationships among women in the family are very important. My grandmother lived with us. It was a 3-generational situation. And I feel like I learned so much about the female relationships. So I would say, yes, all of that's formative. You know, I come from the time when your parents would push you outside and say, don't come back until dark. So I also see in raising my own children and now having grandchildren, I see how that's changed so much. And I wonder how much of an influence that freedom had on me and how that will affect the stories and the growth of the children that I have and the grandchildren that I have and love. So it's very interesting when you think about your past that way.
Oh, that's definitely true. How has it been seeing each generation as you've gone older in time? And, you know, you've had your own children, and obviously there are so many things. Sometimes our parents grow us up in a certain way, but there are many things that we say is really good that our parents grow us up in that way. But there are many things, again, Katherine, that we say, oh, I wouldn't necessarily do that to my children when I have children. Is there anything that sparks a memory in your mind where you say, there are many things that I would do, but there are many things that I wouldn't do?
It's funny because one of the things that children are now taught is you never tell anyone to shut up. You don't use those 2 words. Don't shut up. And my mother's, those were 2 of her favorite words. and I understand it. I was a talker. I was a storyteller from day one. Before I could write, I was writing in my head. And I'm sure that there were nights that all she wanted to do was go to sleep. She was a single working mom. She was a nurse. And I had just things I needed to tell her, stories that were going on, and she's like, "Just shut up." So I've done a really good job of not telling my children to shut up, and it's really easy to not tell your grandchildren to shut up. You just love to hear
Yeah.
them ramble on. But I don't think I've ever said that to any of my 3 children. So
That's really cool.
that's the biggest.
That's really, really cool. So, Catherine, there is one question I absolutely love to ask everyone, and that is, can you define who you are as a person and what you see when you look in the mirror? But on the flip side of that question, has there ever been a time where you have looked in the mirror and not recognized the person staring back at you? How did you manage to come out of that, or even become the person who you wanted to be and be happy with that person?
I think when I look in the mirror, and I have always seen someone for whom it's very important to not necessarily be running around helping people, but helping people to know who they are and encouraging people. I taught high school for many years, and through my writing, I write about women who do that. I will say that I've become confident in a different way. When I was younger, I think I was more abrasive about, let's fix you. And I learned pretty quickly you don't fix people. They don't really need fixing. You need to fix
Exactly.
your attitude about them. And that was something I gradually learned. I'm glad I've learned. About 7.5 years ago, we lost our son, and he was an adult, but it was a terrible situation. And there were many days when I uh, woke up and looked at myself. I didn't know who I was. I didn't want to be defined by grief, but I know you have to feel grief. And in my first book, well, the first book that got published that I wrote after that, there's a strong theme of loss, and loss without having reconciled with the person before the loss. And so grief has come to play an important role in my books, but they're sadness, but my main characters have the kind of spirit I want to have. They stay hopeful even though they go through despair. So I would say that that, of course, was the defining moment when I wasn't sure who I was, and I wasn't sure who I was going to become from that point. And later in your life, that's kind of scary because you think you're already there.
Yeah, that's really, really true. One question that I do want to ask, especially because you shared something so close to your heart, is how does a family cope? Because I know that sometimes, Catherine, it can either bring you together as a family and you bond and become closer and care about each other more, or it can tear you apart. I would just love to ask you, how did that affect you, if you don't mind me asking you?
I think of my youngest daughter. Well, my older daughter is actually my stepdaughter, but think of her as my daughter. So I always say she's my daughter because I've known her since she was 3, a very impressive little 3-year-old. But my younger daughter at the time was living in LA, and she had gotten a job with Oprah, the Oprah Network. And then she went from there to CBS when Oprah did some shifting around. But she liked being in LA. It was fun, but she always talked about she would come home. LA was not going to be home. And she was absolutely devastated, as we all were, by the loss. But for her, it kind of cemented she was ready to come home. And having her come home was a very healing component. We had a yours, mine, and ours set up, but we thought of each other's children as our children. And Kate was the middle piece. And having her back really, I think, helped us a great deal. And we had struggled with situations for a long time before the loss. So I feel like it did strengthen us, but I don't ever feel superior to anyone who goes through it and they don't come out feeling like it strengthened that relationship because everything is so individual.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you shared that, because I know a few people who have gone through that situation, and everybody, like you say, handles it in different ways, and emotionally it can be really challenging. really, really challenging. I think one of the things that I do want to talk about, which I find very important, which connects to the question, is forgiveness. I think forgiveness is one of the most powerful things in the world that us as human beings can do for ourselves and other people. But how does forgiveness help you in your life? But also, how does it make you change the way you think and feel about life?
I think forgiveness, I'm sure someone, I don't remember who said it, but it's the gift you give yourself. And that doesn't mean you have to forget. I will confess, I can hold a grudge. I got that from a long line of women who hold grudges. You particularly if you say something about somebody I love. I mean, I
Yeah.
might forgive you, but I won't forget. But but really forgiving and the subject, I think it helped me. Well, I don't usually talk about it in relationship to my books because they're not about specifically about that. But in the first book, there are sisters, and one of them dies before the older one has a chance to forgive her. And it's that quest for trying to find a way to forgive herself because the sister is gone. She can't forgive her. She does. She really almost had gotten there. So I think for me, it's like petty grudges are one thing, but genuinely forgiving someone while they're there so that
Yeah.
you know it's happened. And they may not even know you were forgiving them, but you know that you let it go, something important like that. Um, because it's frightening. You know, you think about you
Yeah.
could lose someone and have that thing between you that you don't want there. So I try to be more open to be not judging so much, but forgiving when someone has really there are very few people that it's hard for me to forgive because to me it's only the people you truly care about who can
Yes.
hurt you enough that you need to forgive them. The rest of it's like, maybe she had a bad day, or maybe I won't talk to her anymore. You know, but to truly forgive someone that you love is an act of love for them and for yourself. And I think I know that it took me a while to learn that.
What about writing? What inspires you to write? Because, like you say, we talk about the book. Let's talk about the book, The Sisters, because I think that's a good place to start. Where was your mindset when you decided to put pen to paper and even have the imagination to make this book happen? How did you feel?
Well, the book was the idea for the book came from a friend of mine who lost a sister to an abusive relationship, and they had moved to another country. Other than that, there's nothing else similar to it. That was just I just kept thinking, what would that be like? What would and for me, I don't have a sister. I have a wonderful brother. I always wanted to have a sister, although I've done some book talks and I usually say, "Do you have a sister?" And they'll say yes, and I say, "Well, I always wanted one." And several of them go, "Yeah, well, it's not always what it's cracked up to be."
That is true.
Yeah, so that's been very interesting. But for me, it was the idea of what would you do if you didn't get a chance to forgive someone that you had absolutely adored? And not only that, but they go away to a place you can't reach them, and then they're gone forever. And so it's like a piece of yourself is gone. And that I think sometimes it's like if you imagine the worst that's going to happen, then you're not so much afraid of future things. And I almost feel like that book helped me think, okay, this is something that this young woman could never expect would have happened to her, and certainly not to her sister. But knowing that she can find a way to deal with it and come out of it stronger and come out of it with hope, I felt like that was kind of my story too. And I think it's a lot of people's stories that
Yes.
you can't give up on the idea of having hope again.
I agree with you there. I think there's a lot of people that can relate to the book. And even before I go on, I want to say if you ever have a chance to read Catherine's book, I would strongly advise you to go out and get it and read it because there are a lot of things in there that you can learn from. So thank you, Catherine, for sharing that with us.
And my heroines are always able to laugh at themselves. and find amusing things in the world around them too. So it's not like you're going to be um, sad throughout the book. And there's an element of suspense. I mean, somebody's murdered and you're getting chased, and it's not slow paced.
You know, you gotta have a good mindset and you gotta have an open mind. you
Yes,
gotta have a
definitely.
you gotta have an open mind. So you've got several books, Catherine, and I wanna go through all of them if you don't mind, or a few
Sure.
of them at least. So we've gone through The Sometime Sister. So what about Black Rose, if that's correct? Black
No,
Rose.
Black Rose is my publisher. And
Aha.
the book is called The Unreliables.
That's
Uh,
the one.
yes, The Unreliables is also a story of dealing with forgiving yourself. It's very different from The Sometime Sister. Not the heroines, you'll recognize the voice. You'll recognize my voice through them.
Yeah.
But it's a young woman whose husband has been murdered. She's a writer, and she can't accept the verdict, or the not verdict, but the police conclusion that it was a random
Yeah.
situation. And she is just determined that she's going to try to find something out. It's not like she's a detective. She just can't let it go. She also has this feeling that she was responsible for her husband being where he was. And even though everyone tells her that, you know, no, and she tells herself no, she can't get past that. But it's like I said, it has some very fun characters in it. She has a stepmother who is what we call here in Atlanta. There's a place where now there's all sorts of places where wealthy people live. Buckhead is a very prestigious area, and we call ladies who grew up there and continue to go there. We call them Buckhead Betties, and
Oh.
it's not an insult, but things need to be a certain way for the Bettys. And so she is the main character's stepmother is kind of a Buckhead Betty. She means well, but she sets some things into motion that she doesn't realize how dangerous they could be. But and she's funny. And then we have her good friend, the narrator's really good friend, is also funny. I also have, when I was writing the book, it came to me, and I don't really know. Oh, I know. It came to me that the veteran situation in our country, I don't know about in England, but the United States does not treat our veterans the way we should. I don't know if it's
Same in
because
London.
I think it's a universal thing,
Yeah.
and and you'll see homelessness, you'll see suicides, and all sorts of just things that are reprehensible. And for some reason, it was important to me to highlight that with one of my characters, who's a great character. I always fall in love with my characters, but he's a veteran of the Vietnam War and plays an important part in helping the narrator figure out what's going on and a way to help her give back after things have settled down. So that was very important to me, and he showed up. So I did research on that. I had to research Ecuador and the Sometime Sister because a large part of it is set there, and I haven't been. But one of the men in my critique group gave me the best compliment because when I was reading it, he said, "When were you in Ecuador?" And I said, "Well, last night on Google." So, I mean, I really want to go, but it's still a bit. I think it might still be a bit dangerous for tourists, but someday I want to go to Ecuador. It's just beautiful. But the same thing happened to me about the veterans. And when you're writing, it's easy to get carried away and just sort of dump all the information in there because you're so excited to have learned it. So I had to be
That's
very
true.
careful, and that really helped me develop my character because he had to reveal these things without telling everything about it. And you had to feel it instead of read the statistics. So that happens a great deal. And part of his was a forgiveness theme because his life took a terrible turn after the war and he needed to forgive himself as well. The third book that's coming out is called Trust Issues, and it has a three-generational situation. It's coming out in December. The first sentence of it, I haven't totally memorized it, but it says, "My mother was conceived in the back of a van at Woodstock right after Janis Joplin sang a piece of my heart. And so it sets the stage for the generations, the time frame, and very quickly you learn that the grandmother is a free spirit. The mother, who is named after Janis Joplin, not so much a free spirit. And the daughter, the main character, is working on reconciling what she wants to be from both of those women and from her own self. So it has a loss, but it's not the main character's personal loss. And it is also um, it has a little bit of political uh, implications to it. The main character is a PR person. She works on political campaigns, and one of her clients is this horrible judge that she wishes she weren't working on his campaign, and he gets what he deserves. So it does deal with forgiveness. It deals with I just love this one because of it has that generational um, mix, and the mother is searching for her own identity too. She never knew
Yes.
who her dad was, and that's part of the mystery. So it's just a lot of fun family background, but also some pretty heavy issues in the family background, while all this other dangerous kind of scary stuff is going on. So I think people will really like that one. And
That makes.
I'm working on a sequel to The Sometime Sister.
Oh, okay.
Almost
Right.
finished
Let
the
me
first
let,
draft. So
let me know about that one.
I will. I will. I have a title. It's The Substitute Sister, which might give you a little bit of a hint of what's going on.
That sounds good to me. That
Thank you.
definitely sounds good to me. So, what impacts you to be a writer? I know from when we first started speaking, you said when you was younger, you always had stories in your mind, and you kind of know when you're younger what you do want to be. I know as we grow older, our parents can sometimes mold us to go into different things, which is a big impact in our lives. But you seem to have stuck with writing. It's always seemed to be in your mind. What is it about writing that you feel so passionately about, especially for other people who want to become writers?
Yeah, I think, like I said, for me, I can remember having stories inside me bubbling out all the time, even from when I was very young. Apparently, I made up characters a lot, and it wasn't like imaginary friends. It was like scenes from TV that we had, and did that at a pretty young age. I also loved to teach. I loved the idea of teaching, and I did teach high school English and literature and writing for a long time, because you can't really make a living as a single mom in um, writing. So I basically wrote in my head all the time, even when I was teaching. And then I also got to teach a creative writing class, and it was so energizing because I was helping kids tap into their creative processes. And unfortunately, the way we teach writing in most educational systems is a very cut and dry, the 5 paragraph essay, or
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Especially in high school, we're prepping them for a college that it's not really even like that in college. So we're prepping the creativity out of them in their writing. So it was really fun for me to find ways to get that in, even sneak it in the more fun, I mean, the less fun and more dry aspects. So I loved doing that. I loved learning about people through their writing, because
Yes.
sometimes you learn things they would never tell you, and you're not quite sure. It's still a little bit of mystery there, but you have so many good hints about what might be going on with them, and it is fascinating,
That's
which is
true.
why I loved being in a critique group. And if we have any aspiring writers or writers in the audience, if you don't have a critique group, get one. And because it pushed me to keep going, it made me read my stuff out loud, which I hated to do. I could stand
Yeah.
up in front of a class and read Mark Twain and do accents and do the whole thing, but reading my own work was just so hard for me. Now I'm okay with it. I still get nervous sometimes, but it really helped me. And then from the mixed critique group that we had, we formed our women's critique group. We kept both going.
Yes.
And the women's was really helpful because women are basically our audience. I mean, men who read my book, like my husband who had to, and but they like it. It's not just a women's book, which is why I always say suspenseful women's fiction, because women love all kinds of writing. There is no women's
Yeah.
fiction, but because it is for an audience of predominantly women. They buy the books, they read the books. It was really helpful to have this smaller group of women that I trusted, and I loved their writing, and I loved the way they phrased their comments, and I loved the way we were able to take time to get into each other's characters and test
Yeah.
out whether what they were doing made sense. And it's just so helpful. So if you want to write, at least have a partner. If you don't have a critique group, at least get a partner, because it's so helpful. And you may not agree at all with what they say. Many times I sat and pretended to take a note on something and thought, I'm never going to change this. But almost always when they said something, I would go back and look at it, and there was a way to improve it. Maybe not what they said, but a
That's
way
true.
to improve it.
I definitely agree with that one. I definitely do. What is a day like in Catherine's life, from when you wake up in the morning to when you decide, as she's laughing, I like it, to when you decide to be creative or just have a normal day? What is a day like in Catherine's life? I would love people to know.
Well, I recently moved. My younger daughter is expecting a baby in June, and she was over an hour away. And I knew she is so smart and so talented, but she is so worried that she's going to get this wrong. And I think women her age,
Oh,
especially, are such perfectionists. They have so many expectations of themselves, and you just kind of have to relax. And, you think, oh, well, I'm going to put them on the schedule. And I'm like, I just needed to be closer to her. And I'm in the middle of her. Well, I'm just as close to my older daughter. And so when we moved, all my normal days disappeared, because moving at our advanced ages, it almost killed us. It was so hard.
oh,
We moved
okay.
over the holidays, the Christmas holidays, because the market's crazy in this country, and we just we just had to find it something that was where we wanted to be, and we finally found it.
Yeah,
So I'm still settling in. So I used to, when I was much more disciplined and settled in, I would try to set a goal of 500 to 1,000 words a day. And I'm not a
okay.
morning person. I'm not going to pop up and start right away. I like to make my writing a priority. So I put it in my schedule, but it isn't necessarily going to be from 11 to 3 or whatever. It's going to be there, but I feel better about being able to move it around. So I try to get that word count in. Not every day. I mean, you just can't do it every day. Things come up, and
That's true.
you sometimes you want to just have fun. And but I've also
Yeah, we all need
we
fun.
started a podcast. Yes, my critique group started a podcast, and I got kind of involved. We started with local authors, and we had a lot of women local authors on the group. It's called Wild Women Who Write Take Flight. And the group was Wild Women Who Write. And we said, I listened to some podcasts, and I was on a podcast, and I said, ladies, I think we can do a podcast. And they were like, what? I said, no, we're going to try. So it's so much fun. It's way not in your league. We're still beginners, but we have had authors from
Oh,
California and New York and Kentucky and Ohio, and I think we're going to try to get some from New Zealand, a couple of ladies there. So it's been so much fun to do. At first, we had it in my house, and we had a little wine and cheese, and we chatted with the authors because they were all so close. Well, obviously,
yeah.
we can't do that on Zoom, but we still try to keep it, fun. And so I do some prep work on the podcast, not every day with that either. I am on the board of a group called Sisters in Crime. It's a national women. It isn't all, we call it Sisters and Misters in Crime, but we don't have too
I
many
like it.
misters in our group. But it's a good group. I'm on the board for that, so I do a little bit with that. And the Atlanta Writers Club, which is much bigger, but it's local. It's not a national group. I do some work on that board as well. So I try to balance my time, and I know in June, my little new grandson, psh, I don't even know what the schedule's going to be, but I know it's going to be fun.
I love that. That's so cool. That's definitely so cool. One question I would love to ask you is about diversity. I think diversity is such an important subject for everyone to be a part of. How do you feel that you play a part in diversity? And what do you feel your diversity brings to the world, Catherine?
That is a really interesting question because as writers, there's a lot of talk about cultural appropriation and not writing. You can't really write a main character that you don't understand where they're coming from. And
Yeah, I agree.
but then that's in conflict with the idea that writers they could create a world and they don't have to know everything about, like Emily Dickinson wrote about the ocean and she never saw the ocean. It's like, how do you reconcile those things? And what I have done in my books is I will often have a good friend of the main character that I don't have to try to pretend that I know what has happened or the background of that good friend. I just have to understand the friendship. And and
Yes.
that's easier for me. And then, we've had well, it's been around the world, but we just have had some horrible issues in this country about um, racial and ethnic and gender issues that have just been so painful for someone, especially someone who I've been around a while, and I really thought we were getting better. I knew we weren't great, but I thought we were getting better, and I feel like it's like one step forward and three or four steps back right now. I think we
Yeah.
can make up the difference, but I think we have to consciously do it. And one of the funny things I read is when white women, especially, get agitated about injustice and we want to do something, we form a book club. So I wanted to do a little better than that. So the book club that that I got involved with, my daughter, the younger one, I said, we've got to have a book club, but we can't be all white ladies in the book club because, you know, how are we going to know? So she found this wonderful young woman named Megan Weaver. And Megan is an actress and a writer and, oh my gosh, an entrepreneur. And she agreed to lead our book club. And we'd hoped she'd bring more of her friends, but I think they were all like, really? These ladies, we don't know if we're going to hang out. But Megan has hung in there with us, and we have done some reading of books I never would have read, not both fiction and nonfiction. We read So You Want to Talk About Race, which was just
Yes.
so good and
Yeah.
very easy to take small bites of it. We read,
Yeah.
I think Black Devil and White America, a collection of essays. Oh my gosh, that was a musical theme, and he talked about all these cool musicians, and I've forgotten her last name, but Mary, who sang with the Rolling Stones, and she did that part in Give Me Shelter where she screams murder and the story behind that. So I've learned so many things, and we're reading now uh, how to be a light keeper because we realized we were reading all about all these injustices and we're just so frustrated. What do you do? So the book we're reading now is inspirational and it shows you how to approach things so that you can find joy through activism.
Yes. Yes.
So
I'm
I'm
actually proud that you
hoping,
guys do that,
yeah, I'm hoping that I'm adding to an open-mindedness about
which I
diversity.
think we all need more open mindedness. I'm glad that more of us are talking about it and even talking about uncomfortable things in life can help the world. It's not just, oh, I'm going to ignore it because I feel uncomfortable about it. The more we speak about it, the more we understand each other. And I think that is the most beautiful thing that you can do in the world because I always say to people, you never know where you're going to be. You might fall down somewhere, and it's the person who you least expect to help you will be the one person to lift you off the ground and save your life. I always say that. So I never give any discrimination against anyone. I'm always very loving and humble, and I think we need more people like that. And that's why I say, Katherine, I am proud of you because you took that step to do something. And it's the small things that make the big things happen in the world, you know? And you are right for even just bringing it up that we need to have more change. You are right.
And
So that means a lot.
well, thank you. I feel like I shouldn't even be thanked for that, though. I feel like that's what we should just be doing. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
no-brainer. If you make the world better for the people for whom it's the worst, you make the world better for everybody. And that's just common sense. But we seem to have a lack of common sense in our world today. So
That is true. Oh, it might just be the people who have the power just don't want, you know, people to have that compassion and kindness, because the less compassion and kindness that we have in the world and the more people are fighting against each other, the more that it creates war, the more money they make. And we all know the politics of everything. You know how everything is. It's more about money and power rather than love, compassion and wisdom for each other. And that is something that we need to just fight against and educate ourselves. One of the most important things we can do in the world is to educate ourselves and other human beings around us. So, and I think, you know,
I
it'll help.
I think it's interesting because there, you hear a lot of people complain about um, social media and that sort of thing. And yeah, there are a lot of things about social media that are not good and very frustrating. But one of the good things is it is very hard to keep world secrets with social media now. I mean, you better be nice because somebody's going to catch you not being nice, and they're
Uh-huh.
going to put it everywhere. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if I don't care why people are nice, just be nice.
That is so true. That is so true. Oh dear, I might use that one, you know, Catherine.
Have
That
it
is
all,
so
yeah.
so true. That is so true. How do you feel? Okay, let's talk about creativity. One of the most fantastic things that we all have, and the talents we all have in the world is creativity. But talk to me more about how you feel your creativity helps you and how it has helped you, especially with an obstacle in your life, because we all go through things in our lives, good ones and bad ones. But how has creativity helped you in your life overcome obstacles?
I think that it helped me a great deal because especially as a teacher, I would hear kids say, and teachers, "Oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body." And I thought, it's
Yeah,
because
I've heard that
people
before.
told you you don't, or because you compared yourself to people and you didn't understand your spark was different from their spark. So I've always thought creativity was kind of a habit. If you could recognize even when someone says something in a unique way, or it makes you laugh because you haven't heard it thought of that way, and you tell somebody, oh, like you just said to me, oh, I'm going to use that. Well, knowing that someone thinks that what you have done is unique and important gives you the courage to try something you might not try. And I think having that courage to see what might be there will really help you when you're going through a time where you can barely see how you're going to get through the day. And if
Yeah.
you have that habit to fall back on, it may not be there right away, but creativity is about living creatively and finding ways to help yourself feel better and finding ways, even if it's just one little thing that you can do, and it might build on that. So I feel like if we could encourage young children especially and not let it drop. It's like I taught gifted kids for and all levels of kids. But in my gifted training, I learned so many ways that we don't encourage children to be creative because the creative kid is often a problem. They're the one in the classroom going, "But why?" Or, "Well, what if?" And you've got like elementary school teachers could have what, 20, 30 some kids in some areas. you just don't have time to do why for every kid. So I understand it. And our system doesn't encourage it. I feel like very few educational systems do. And I feel if we did that from the beginning and we asked children in a way they could understand, what are you passionate about? Did anyone in your schooling ever ask you, what are you passionate about? Now, obviously, when the child is little, you got to phrase it differently. And you also
Yes.
have to understand, help them understand, you may be passionate about that today. I mean, you're passionate about dinosaurs. You might become an archaeologist, or you might go, okay, dinosaurs, I'm ready for something new. But this encouraging passion in young people will really help them tap into creativity, but more importantly, it'll give them the courage to speak up about things they care about because they understand how important those things are. And I feel like we need to build an educational system around passion. And, you know, I, I
I agree with you there.
I remember I had one student in high school who said she was going to become a teacher, and I was so pleased. And then I ran into her later, and she said, "No," she said, "I didn't." She said, "I realized when I started that the only reason I wanted to become a teacher was because it looked like you were having so much fun being a teacher." And I said, "That's even nicer to me than if you had gone ahead and become a teacher, because just knowing that I could show you that there was passion in what I did." Was
Yes.
it could help you know that you needed to find that for yourself.
I love that. I totally love that. So let's talk about if there was one question, Catherine, that you wished was asked to you that nobody ever really asks you, what question would that be and why?
That's a good question. Well, of course, no one ever asked me what I was passionate about, but, no one ever asks why you make a decision. Like, it's like I might have I chose to be a teacher. I don't remember anybody asking me why I wanted to be a teacher. Why I wanted to be a teacher. I mean, yes, you go into teaching because you wanna make the world a better place and all those lofty goals, and I'm not even sure how I would have answered that. I think it would have been because it gives me joy, which is, that's not really what people expect or want to hear. They wanna hear and they wanna hear it more unselfish, but it just made me feel good. But no one ever asks you that. And then from there, you can go on to think, well, why does it make you feel good? And you can ask more. But I don't think anyone ever asked me why I made even little decisions. Like you get in trouble for doing stuff that you're not supposed to do. But I don't remember anybody asking me, well, why did you decide to do that? It was just, you
Yes.
made a bad decision, right? Of course, you're going to say that, yes, but you don't want to get in trouble anymore. But yeah, and I'm going to try to remember that and ask my grandchildren, "Why did you do that? Why did you think that was a good decision? And do you still
I,
think so?"
I've, yeah, I think it's a good, I always love asking that question because you don't just think of it now. You may think of it like 10 years down the line and you may say to yourself, what's the question that nobody's ever asked me and I still haven't been asked it? So, yeah, I love that. Take it with you, go with it, ask everyone it.
Yeah. Yeah, and even
You
if you're
know?
there even if it was a good decision, it's not always, reflective. Well, like, I think teaching was a good decision, but why did I
Yeah.
make it? Because I worked with student teachers and, through the university system, and I don't and I didn't ask that too much. I did ask them, but I didn't require too much of a response from them because I knew that some of them just did it because, they
Yeah.
and when I was at my age, there weren't a whole lot of other fields you could go into, um, as a woman. So now it's really important to ask why. Why did you do that? Why do you because my younger daughter both of my daughters went into production work, and my older daughter is now a partner in a freelance production firm. My younger daughter found out that she liked nonprofit. She did Big Brothers Big
Yes.
Sisters when she went to LA, and she loved it. And she also realized she needed to make some money, so she did figure out how to get into some foundation work eventually. But at first, she was working for Points of Light and Care and having a wonderful time doing it. And it just kind of was she and the reason she did I did ask her why. We did talk about why. And for her, it was just like it was just she needed a reason for her work. And
Yes.
other than making money. And the reason for her work was to start a school in Africa or to do these things. So I think that is really cool. And with my older daughter, it gives her the power to also help groups that need recognition and may or may not have the finances to do that. She can
Yeah.
eventually work to consult and help with that. So I think the whys are so important with that.
Most definitely. If there was one quote, Catherine, that represented you as a person, what quote would you choose and why would you choose that particular quote?
Well, this is not terribly deep, but I love Dorothy Parker. And I remember growing up in the fourth grade, they get an eye test, and realized that there were individual leaves on the trees that I had never seen because I was just so needed glasses. But Dorothy
Aw.
Parker said, "Men don't make passes at girls who wear glasses." And the reason that sticks with me is because it just hits at the insecurities that women have about everything. It's their appearance, it's how they measure up, and Dorothy Parker she was brilliantly brutal with her satire and her sarcasm and that sort of thing, and wrote the poem about one perfect rose no one had ever given. But she'd rather have one perfect limousine or one, she was really funny, but that for some reason that quote, I'm sure it stuck with me because I didn't want to wear glasses, and of course I got contacts and the whole thing, but it was just like, who cares? Why didn't I say who cares? If a man can't see past your glasses, what do you want with him anyway? But
Exactly.
it's hard to see that. And it's still hard for young girls and young women to see that, I think. I think that's one of those basic insecurities that it takes a whole different mindset for, at least for Western women. I think. I don't know
Yeah.
the world, but
No, I think I agree with you, especially for the younger generation. Um, the younger generation have it even harder, I feel,
I do too,
as well.
because of the social media images. And
Exactly.
yeah, I think they need to. They don't really believe that everybody is photoshopped. It's like maybe that's what we should teach them in the first grade. Teach them how to Photoshop and say, okay, that's how you spot
I'll come and
it.
see. I'll come and teach them. I will come and teach
I
them
think
how to
that would
do
be
that. See.
fun.
Oh man, I've only got two more for you, Catherine. I've abundantly enjoyed it, but what is the best advice you have ever been given which helps you in your life and helps you pass on to anybody that you love and care about?
Well, one thing that both my grandmother and my mother told me, and while it isn't entirely true, the essence of it is they were both, and it was remarkable, I think, for the time period because both of them really felt that I could do anything that I wanted to do.
I
And
like that.
the qualifier for that is finding out what you really want to do, because that sounds like, oh, well, I can be president. I don't want to be president. I mean, it's an awful job. I feel so sorry for our president right now. But the idea that it instilled in me a confidence that I didn't even realize was there. But, and even now, like doing the podcast, I was like, well, why can't we do a podcast? I mean,
Exactly.
other people are doing a podcast, and you don't have to have a doctorate in it. So my younger daughter, one time gave me, it was a backhanded compliment, because I was saying something like, well, I can't do brain surgery, and she said, well, I'm glad there's something you think you can't do. And I was like, well, okay, that's not so bad.
Whoa.
But I think it was that advice that you can do anything you want. Of course, there's qualifiers, and women can't have everything. We can't have it all. Nobody can, but we can prioritize to the point where we can truly have what we want we if we're passionate about it.
That's true. That is definitely true. When was the last time you felt totally at peace with yourself, Katherine?
Well, it's just a couple of months ago, my daughter and son-in-law had a gender reveal party. And,
Okay.
that we didn't do that. Now it's such a big deal. I don't know. Is that a big deal in England?
Oh yeah, they pop the
Oh my
balloons and
gosh,
they have the
like hot
cakes
air
and then
balloons flying over, dropping blue
yeah.
confetti. I mean, it's out of control. But this was very sweet, and they had been expecting the baby to be a girl, and I hadn't really. I thought it was going to be a boy, but I didn't say anything. And then right before the party, I was like, this is a boy. And I was right. But the look on my son-in-law's face when he said, because he thought it was a girl, he was just dead certain. He said, I'm going to have a son. And there was something so beautiful about that moment. And not just because of him, but because I feel like men have come such a long way in embracing parenthood. And I felt like my daughter's going to be okay. My other son-in-law, best dad ever. It's so important to him, and it's like there are more people carrying the
Yes.
generations to come, and it made me feel so happy.
Oh, I like that. And you know what? That's actually a really nice way to end the podcast. But before I do, I would love to ask you, Katherine, where can everyone find you on all your social media platforms and anywhere that you feel would get people in touch with you? Where can they actually find you?
If you Google Katherine Nichols author, you'll be directed to my webpage. It's KATHERINE My books are on Amazon. The Sometimes Sister, The Unreliables, and Trust Issues upcoming. I am also have a website called Wild Women Who Write, and you can find out some fun things about our group and the podcast, Wild Women Who Write Take Flight. So if you're and I started a TikTok account. It's hilarious.
Oh,
It's not really, I'm not really that funny, but it's hilarious to think about me starting a TikTok account. So I'm all over the place.
I love that. I'm going to check that
You
out.
should. It's interesting.
Oh man, Katherine, I want to thank you so much for taking your time to come on the Ask People podcast. You have been an absolutely wonderful guest. Thank you so
It's
much.
been so much fun.
Thank you. And guys, thank you so much for listening to the Ask People podcast. And please remember, you can subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and any other platform that you prefer listening to. Please also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also donate to the Ask People podcast by simply going to the Savia Rocks website or just typing in paypal.me/Us People podcast. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Stay happy, stay positive, and as always, please continue to be kind to one another.
I think when I look in the mirror, and I have always seen someone for whom it's very important to not necessarily be running around helping people, but helping people to know who they are and encouraging people. I taught high school for many years, and through my writing, I write about women who do that. I will say that I've become confident in a different way. When I was younger, I think I was more abrasive about, let's fix you. And I learned pretty quickly, you don't fix people. They don't really need fixing. You need to fix your attitude about them.